Have you ever had a moment where every single instinct you have is screaming that you're in danger? That feeling deep in your gut that you are being hunted? This is the story of a photographer who went looking for a forgotten piece of the past and found something waiting for him. This is the story of a weekend spent in an abandoned cabin in northern Maine, and the moment he realized he wasn't just alone, he was next. His name was Alex, and for 5 years he'd worked as a documentary photographer. He didn't shoot weddings or graduations. His specialty was what he called the beauty of decay. He sought out abandoned places, factories, hospitals, schools, and his personal favorite homes to try and capture the soul of what was left behind. He believed there was a story in the peeling paint, in a dust-covered toy left on the floor, in a calendar still showing a date from decades ago. That was the story he was trying to tell. The cabin wasn't on any map. He'd found it through a deep dive on some obscure urban exploration forum. The post was cryptic, just a handful of grainy photos and a vague reference to Piscataquis County, Maine. The user claimed the cabin had been abandoned since a fire in the 1970s. For Alex, that was like striking gold. A true time capsule, untouched, deep in the sprawling woods of New England. It took him 2 obsessive weeks of cross-referencing old property records and satellite images to even guess at its location. The drive itself should have been his first warning. He left Boston in his beat-up 2012 Subaru, a car that had seen more dirt roads than paved ones. The further north he drove, the more civilization just seemed to melt away. Paved highways turned to 2-lane county roads which gave way to unmarked gravel tracks. His cell signal flickered, then died completely about an hour before he reached the turnoff. The isolation was staggering. The trees, pine and birch, grew so thick they seemed to swallow the light, and the silence was only broken by the crunch of gravel under his tires. He'd packed for the weekend, a cooler full of sandwiches and coffee. He was prepared for solitude. He wasn't prepared for what was waiting. He finally found it late in the afternoon. The driveway was so overgrown he almost missed it. A rusted chain was strung between 2 posts, bearing a faded private property sign. He parked on the shoulder, grabbed his pack and camera gear, and walked the final half-mile. And then, there it was. The cabin stood in a small clearing looking like it had grown out of the earth itself. It was made of thick, dark logs, weathered to a silvery gray. The porch roof sagged dangerously, and the windows were like vacant, black eyes. But it was exactly what he'd hoped for. It had a strange, melancholy beauty. It didn't feel evil, not at first. It just felt sad. He found a back door with a busted lock and let himself in. The air was thick and musty with the smell of damp wood, dust, and time. The main room was larger than he expected, dominated by a massive stone fireplace. A sofa and 2 armchairs, their floral patterns faded to muted greens and browns, sat shrouded in dust. On a wall in the small kitchen, a calendar was pinned, its picture a soaring bald eagle. The month was July 1976. He spent the next hour just exploring, his camera clicking away. He documented everything: the stack of yellowed newspapers, the 3 mismatched coffee mugs in a cabinet, the single child-sized welly boot that lay on its side by the front door. These were the details that told the human story. He felt a rush of professional excitement. He noted the way the floorboards creaked with every step, the way the wind whistled through a crack in a window pane, the faint scratching from within a wall that was probably just a mouse. He was so focused on capturing the atmosphere that he ignored the little prickle of unease on the back of his neck. He told himself it was just the setting. It's supposed to be creepy, that's why he was there. As dusk settled, the forest outside bled into a deep, uniform darkness. The temperature inside the cabin dropped. Alex pulled out a high-powered flashlight and set up his camp for the night, unrolling his sleeping bag in front of the cold fireplace. He wasn't about to risk lighting a fire in a place this old and dry. He ate a cold sandwich and reviewed the pictures on his camera, thrilled with the results. The place had a real aura of forgotten memories. After a while, the deep, oppressive silence of the woods began to press in. It was a quiet he wasn't used to. A silence so complete it felt like it had a weight, a presence of its own. He zipped himself into his sleeping bag and tried to get some rest. He was tired from the long drive and the hike. He lay there, listening to the old house breathe. The wind moaned over the roof, and the cabin answered with a chorus of groans and creaks. He'd just started to drift off when he heard the first sound that didn't belong. It was a soft thud, faint but distinct, and it came from below him, from the basement. His eyes snapped open. He held his breath, his body tense, listening. Nothing. After a minute of absolute silence, he let out a slow breath. "It's an old house," he told himself. "It's just settling. An animal probably knocked something over outside." He'd explored dozens of places like this. They were always full of strange noises. He rolled over, trying to dismiss it. But then came the other feeling. It started as a sudden, intense chill that had nothing to do with the air. A cold that seemed to radiate from the inside out. His skin broke out in goosebumps, the small hairs on his arms and the back of his neck standing on end. It was that primal animal sensation of being watched. He scanned the dark room, his heart starting to thump a little faster. The windows were just black rectangles. The corners of the room were lost in shadow. Of course, there was nothing there. It was just his imagination, running wild in a place built for ghost stories. He was alone. He had to be. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing himself to relax. Eventually, against his better judgment, exhaustion won, and he fell into a tense, shallow sleep. The next time he woke up, it wasn't to a sound. It was to a feeling. A feeling of absolute gut-wrenching dread that sat heavy in his stomach and made it hard to breathe. The air in the cabin was frigid. He could see his own breath pluming in the beam of his flashlight, which was still on beside him. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy with cold and fear. He thumbed the screen on. The numbers burned into his eyes. 2:17 a.m. And that's when he heard it. Footsteps. They weren't coming from the basement this time. They were on the same floor as him. Unmistakably human. Slow, heavy, deliberate. The sound of someone walking on the old creaking floorboards in the hallway that led to the bedrooms. Creak. Pause. Creak. Pause. He stopped breathing. His blood felt like ice. Every muscle in his body locked. His first thought was a squatter. Or worse, some local who'd seen his car and had come to investigate. Stories from other explorers flashed through his mind. Encounters with hostile vagrants or territorial property owners. This was real. This wasn't the house settling. This was a person. The footsteps were agonizingly slow, each creak a hammer blow against his skull. They were moving from the back of the cabin, down the short hallway toward the living area where he was lying, completely exposed. He was paralyzed, trapped between the instinct to stay perfectly still and the urge to bolt upright and scream. He chose stillness. His flashlight was just out of reach. Any movement would give him away. The footsteps stopped, just outside the doorway to the living room, in the darkness just beyond his vision. The silence that followed was 1,000 times worse than the noise. It was a loaded, expectant silence. He could feel a presence there, standing, listening. He held his breath until his lungs burned, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Minutes stretched into an eternity. He lay there, a statue carved from fear, staring into the oppressive blackness of the doorway. Then, a new sound began. A soft, metallic scrape, the sound of the main front doorknob. From his position, he could just make out the silhouette of the front door. He watched as the old brass doorknob began to turn. It moved with a slow, grinding reluctance, as if the mechanism was rusted solid. It turned a quarter of the way, then stopped. A pause. Then it started to jiggle, back and forth, more and more violently. The rattling echoed in the dead quiet of the cabin. Someone was outside, trying to get in, but that made no sense. The footsteps had been inside. His brain struggled to process the contradiction. Had the person inside gone out? Or were there two of them? The rattling became more frantic, the door shaking in its frame. It sounded like someone was desperately trying to escape. And then as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The doorknob was still. The silence crashed back in, heavier than before. No more footsteps, no more rattling, nothing. Alex didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He lay there, rigid with terror, until the first faint gray light of dawn began to filter through the grimy windows. He listened to every single creak and groan of the house, but the footsteps did not return. When the sun was fully up, casting long, dusty shafts of light through the room, some of the terror gave way to a desperate need for answers. His first instinct was to grab his gear and run, but he couldn't. He was a documentarian. His job was to find the story, and whatever happened here last night was a story that demanded to be understood. A part of him also needed to prove he wasn't going crazy. With his heaviest mag light gripped like a club, he forced himself to move. First, the front door. He examined it closely. It was a heavy, solid wood door with a sturdy deadbolt. He had locked it from the inside when he arrived. It was still locked. No marks, no signs of forced entry. He cautiously unlocked it and stepped out onto the sagging porch. The ground was soft and damp. There were his footprints from the day before, and no others. None. It made no sense. The rattling doorknob, the footsteps. How? He felt a growing suspicion that whatever was in this cabin wasn't a person, not a living one anyway. That's when he remembered the first sound, the thud from the basement. Every horror movie trope screamed at him not to go down there, but the need to know was stronger than the fear. The entrance was a narrow door off the kitchen. He pulled it open, and a wave of cold, musty air that smelled of damp earth and rot hit him. A steep, rickety set of wooden stairs led down into darkness. He took a deep breath and started down, sweeping the beam of his flashlight back and forth. The stairs groaned. The basement was small, with a low ceiling and a dirt floor filled with junk. A rusted-out washing machine, broken furniture shrouded in cobwebs, stacks of old canning jars. He moved slowly, carefully, to the far corner. That's where he saw it. Behind a pile of rotting firewood, a section of the stone foundation looked wrong. One of the stones was a different color, and it wasn't set with mortar like the others. It looked loose. His heart started pounding again. He knelt and pushed at the stone. It wiggled. He worked his fingers into the crack and pulled. It was heavy, but it came free, scraping against the surrounding rock. Behind it was a dark cavity. Tucked inside was a small tin box. It was an old biscuit tin, rusted around the edges. His hands were trembling as he lifted it out. He sat back on the dirt floor and placed it in his lap. For a moment, he just stared at it, a strange sense of reverence and dread washing over him. This was it. This was the heart of the cabin. He pried the lid open. Inside, he saw a small, tarnished silver locket. Beneath that was a small stack of sepia-toned photographs tied together with a faded ribbon. He carefully untied the ribbon. They showed a family. A man with a severe face and dark eyes, a woman with a gentle, tired smile, and a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, with a gap-toothed grin. In the first few photos, they looked happy. But as he went through the stack, the mood changed. The last photo was of just the mother and daughter. They were standing in front of the stone fireplace upstairs. The mother's smile was gone, replaced by a look of deep, profound sadness. The little girl wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking up at her mother with an expression of worry. At the very bottom of the box was a single folded piece of paper, brittle with age. He carefully unfolded it. On it, written in a shaky, almost desperate script, were 8 words. She never left, still waiting in the dark. The paper fell from his trembling fingers. He stared at the photo of the mother and daughter, then at the dark, empty basement, and everything clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening finality. The legends he'd read about online, the ones he'd dismissed as folklore, came rushing back. A fire, a mother and daughter who died, a father who survived. The footsteps at 2:17 a.m., the little girl's boot by the door, the turning doorknob. It wasn't someone trying to get in, it was someone trying to get out. She never left. The mother, this was her tomb. And he had just opened the door. Pure, absolute panic seized him. He didn't think. He just reacted. He scrambled backward on the dirt floor, kicking the tin box away, its contents spilling into the grime. He lurched to his feet and ran for the stairs, stumbling up them, not daring to look behind him. He burst out of the basement door and didn't stop. He didn't grab his camera bag. He didn't grab his sleeping bag. He left it all. The only things he took were the keys in his pocket and his phone. He sprinted out the back door, vaulted over the porch railing, and hit the ground running. The half-mile back to his car was a frantic blur. Branches whipped at his face as he stumbled over roots, his lungs burning. Every shadow was a figure. Every snap of a twig was a footstep right behind him. He was convinced he would feel a cold hand grab his shoulder at any second. When he finally saw his Subaru through the trees, he felt a surge of adrenaline-fueled relief. He fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so violently, it took 3 tries to unlock the door. He threw himself inside, locked the doors, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life and he slammed the car into drive, tearing away from that overgrown path. He floored it, sending rocks and mud flying. He didn't slow down, and he didn't look in his rearview mirror. Not once. He was too afraid of what he might see standing on the road behind him. The drive back to anything resembling civilization felt endless. When his phone finally chirped with a signal, he almost cried. The sight of a paved road of another car was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He drove for 6 straight hours, stopping only for gas, and checked into a brightly lit, sterile motel room just outside of Portland. He jammed a chair under the doorknob. He didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that last photograph and the words from the note. She never left, still waiting in the dark. Days turned into weeks. Back in the safety of the city, the cabin refused to leave him. It had burrowed into his mind. He had to know the rest of the story. Abandoning his photography, he became an obsessive researcher, digging through online archives for Piscataquis County. And then he found it. A small article from a local newspaper dated August 1976. The headline was simple: Fire Claims 2 at Remote Homestead. It described a tragic fire at a rural cabin. The wife, Eleanor, and her 7-year-old daughter, Sarah, had perished. The husband, Thomas, had survived. But as he read on, the horror deepened. The legends had gotten the basic story right but had missed the most crucial detail. Thomas wasn't just a grieving survivor, he was the primary suspect. He had told investigators that his wife had been acting erratically, that she had become paranoid and set the fire herself. But the fire marshal had found evidence of an accelerant used on the basement door, suggesting the fire was set intentionally to block the only escape route. Thomas was brought in for questioning, but before he could be charged, he disappeared. His truck was found abandoned near the Canadian border. He was never seen again. Alex leaned back in his chair, the room feeling cold again. He finally understood. The note in the box wasn't a lament. It was a killer's terrified warning. Thomas hadn't stayed to mourn. He'd fled. He had hidden that box not as a memorial but as a confession and a caution. His wife, Eleanor, wasn't just a sad spirit. She was a vengeful one, trapped in the darkness where she died. She was waiting for the man who put her there. Waiting for Thomas. And a random photographer, just looking for a story, had disturbed her rest. The footsteps, the turning doorknob. It was her. Eleanor. Trying to get out of the cabin she was bound to, or perhaps trying to get to the first living person she had encountered in decades. Alex never went back to Maine. He's tried to put the cabin behind him, but it lingers. And there's one final detail that keeps him awake more than any other. That small silver locket he saw in the tin box. He can't get the image out of his head. It looked just like one his own grandmother used to wear. He tells himself it's just a coincidence, a trick of memory and fear. It has to be. The story you just heard is based on a collection of real accounts and local legends from the deep woods of northern Maine. The isolation of these remote places can play tricks on your mind, but sometimes the feeling that you're not alone is more than just a feeling. If you have a true story of your own that you'd like to share, you can submit it to the email address in the description below. For more scary stories that explore the darkness at the edge of the map, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications. You never know what's waiting to be found.